The rain was relentless that night, a furious curtain of water that turned the coastal highway into a treacherous ribbon of slick asphalt and blinding spray. Griffin Shaw had been driving for 6 hours, his 2 young daughters asleep in the back seat, their soft breathing the only comfort in the suffocating darkness. His fingers ached from gripping the steering wheel too tightly, and his eyes burned with a fatigue that went far beyond physical exhaustion. The past 2 years had been an unending battle, first, the slow, painful unraveling of his marriage, and then the crushing weight of becoming a single father to 2 little girls who deserved so much more than he could give them. But the promise of Havenport kept him going. A new city, a fresh start, a chance to rebuild the life that had crumbled around him. He had sold everything they owned, packed what little remained into their worn-out station wagon, and driven across 3 states to escape the ghosts of their past. His new job at a small architecture firm was waiting for him, and for the first time in months, he allowed himself to feel a flicker of hope. Then he saw her. A flash of silver in his headlights, a car, overturned and crumpled against the guardrail like a discarded piece of origami. Steam hissed from the destroyed engine, and the rain hammered against the twisted metal with violent indifference. The wreckage was precariously close to the cliff's edge, and one wrong move could send it tumbling into the churning sea below. Griffin's heart seized. He slammed on the brakes, the tires screeching against the wet pavement, and pulled over without a second thought. "Stay here," he whispered to his sleeping daughters, his voice barely audible over the storm. He grabbed his phone and a flashlight, then plunged into the downpour without hesitation. The rain soaked through his thin jacket in seconds, plastering his dark hair to his forehead and making the ground treacherous beneath his feet. He slipped twice, catching himself just before he fell, and finally reached the wreckage. The car was a mess, a once beautiful sedan now reduced to a mangled heap of steel and glass. He could see the logo on the twisted frame, Ashford Industries. It was a name he vaguely recognized from the news, a massive conglomerate run by some billionaire he had never met. Griffin shone his light through the shattered window and saw her. A woman, unconscious, her dark hair plastered to her pale face like wet silk. A gash on her forehead was bleeding into her eyes, and her expensive charcoal suit was torn in several places. Her left leg was twisted at an unnatural angle, and there was blood pooling beneath her. She was beautiful, even in her broken state, with high cheekbones, full lips, and a face that, even in repose, spoke of power and determination. "Ma'am?" Griffin called out, his voice strained with panic. "Can you hear me?" She didn't respond. Her chest was barely moving. He reached through the broken window, careful not to cut himself on the jagged glass, and felt for a pulse. His fingers trembled as he pressed against her cold, clammy skin. For a terrifying moment, he felt nothing. Then, weak, but there. A faint, fluttering beat. "Thank God," he breathed, a shaky exhale of relief. "Okay, okay. I've got you. You're going to be okay." He pulled out his phone and called 911, his voice shaking as he gave the operator their location. Then he did what he could. He found a blanket in his trunk and covered her with it, trying to preserve her body heat. He held her hand, the only human contact he could offer, and talked to her in a low, soothing voice until the ambulance arrived. "You're going to be fine," he said, his thumb stroking her cold knuckles. "I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere. Just hold on, okay? You have to hold on. Your story isn't over yet. Someone out there needs you. You just have to keep fighting." He didn't know why he said that. Maybe he was talking to himself as much as he was talking to her. Because he understood, in that moment, what it felt like to be broken and alone, to be on the edge of giving up. And he refused to let that happen to anyone else. The hospital was a blur of harsh fluorescent lights, antiseptic smells, and the relentless beeping of machines. Griffin sat in the waiting room, his wet clothes clinging to his skin like a second layer of cold misery. A kind-eyed nurse had brought him a cup of coffee and a threadbare blanket, and she had offered to watch his daughters while he waited for news. Poppy and Hazel had woken up during the chaos, their small faces etched with confusion and fear. Now they were huddled on either side of him, their little bodies pressed against his for warmth and comfort. "Daddy, is the lady going to be okay?" asked Poppy, his eldest at 7 years old. Her big brown eyes shimmered with unshed tears, and she clutched her favorite stuffed elephant, a worn-out thing named Elmer that had seen better days. "I don't know, sweetheart," Griffin said, pulling her closer. He kissed the top of her head, inhaling the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. "But the doctors are taking care of her. She's in good hands. The very best hands." "She looked like a princess," whispered Hazel, his youngest at 5. She was clutching her stuffed rabbit, a floppy-eared creature named Barnaby. "A sad, hurt princess." Griffin managed a tired smile. "She did, didn't she? She looked like a princess who needs someone to believe in her." "And you believed in her, Daddy," Hazel said, her voice full of childish certainty. "You always believe in people who need help. That's why you're the best daddy in the whole world." Griffin's throat tightened with emotion. He blinked rapidly, refusing to let the tears fall. "Thank you, baby. That means the world to me." Hours passed. The girls fell back asleep, their heads resting on his lap. Griffin stared at the clock on the wall, watching the minutes crawl by with agonizing slowness. He thought about his ex-wife, Penelope, and how she had walked out on them with barely a backward glance. He thought about the sleepless nights, the endless worry, the constant fear that he wasn't enough. Not as a father, not as a man, not as anything. But then he looked down at his daughters, their peaceful faces, their trust in him so absolute and unwavering, and he remembered why he kept going. For them. Always for them. Finally, a doctor emerged from the double doors, his face weary but relieved. He was a tall, balding man with kind eyes and a white coat stained with something that looked suspiciously like blood. "Mr. Shaw," he called out. "The woman you brought in?" Griffin stood up carefully, not wanting to wake the girls. "Yes, that's me." "How is she?" The doctor smiled, a genuine expression of relief. "She's stable. She has a concussion, a broken leg, and several lacerations, but she's going to be fine. We've set the leg, stitched the wounds, and she's resting comfortably. She's actually awake now, and she's asking for you." Griffin blinked in surprise. "For me? Why would she be asking for me?" "She wants to thank you," the doctor said. "She's been very insistent. I've rarely seen a patient so determined." He chuckled softly. "You can see her, but just for a few minutes. She needs rest. And I should warn you, she's a lot." "What do you mean?" The doctor's smile widened. "You'll see." Griffin left his daughters with the nurse, promising to be back soon, and walked into the private room. The hospital room was quiet, the only sound the steady beeping of a heart monitor. The woman was propped up against the pillows, her head bandaged, her leg encased in a heavy cast. Even battered and bruised, she radiated an aura of authority that filled the entire space. Her eyes, a striking shade of emerald green, fixed on him with an intensity that made him feel like he was being thoroughly assessed. She was studying him, cataloging every detail, and he had the uncomfortable sensation of being a specimen under a microscope. "You're the man who saved me," she said, her voice raspy but clear. There was no question in her tone, only statement. "I did what anyone would have done," Griffin said, shrugging awkwardly. He shoved his hands into his pockets, suddenly self-conscious. "I'm just glad you're okay. You gave us quite a scare." "You're too modest," she said, a faint smile playing on her lips. It was a small expression, but it transformed her face, softening the sharp edges of her features. Most people would have driven past. Most people would have convinced themselves it wasn't their problem. But you didn't. You stopped. You risked your own safety to help a complete stranger. That takes courage. It didn't feel like courage, Griffin admitted. It just felt like the right thing to do. I couldn't have lived with myself if I'd driven past. Exactly, she said, her eyes gleaming with something that looked like approval. That's exactly what makes you different. I'm Coraline Ashford. And I owe you my life. Griffin's eyes widened. Coraline Ashford? The Coraline Ashford? The CEO of Ashford Industries? The very same, she said, a hint of dry amusement in her voice. Though I suspect you're not impressed by titles. Most people are, but I have a feeling you're not most people. You're right about that, Griffin said, finally allowing himself a small smile. I'm just an architect. A single dad. I'm nobody special. I disagree, Coraline said firmly. You're very special indeed. Now tell me about yourself, Griffin Shaw. Tell me everything. They talked for over an hour, far longer than the doctor had recommended. Griffin found himself opening up to her in a way he hadn't opened up to anyone in years. He told her about his failed marriage, about Penelope leaving him for a wealthier man, about the crushing loneliness of being a single parent. He told her about his daughters, Poppy and Hazel, the two lights of his life. He told her about his new job in Havenport, his hopes for a fresh start, his fears that he would fail again. And Coraline listened. She didn't interrupt, didn't judge, didn't offer empty platitudes. She just listened, her green eyes fixed on his face, absorbing every word. I know what it's like to be alone, she said finally, her voice soft. I built my empire from nothing. I fought tooth and nail for every scrap of success. And I've been surrounded by people my whole life, employees, board members, business partners, but I've never felt more isolated. I've never let anyone get close. I've never trusted anyone enough. Why not? Griffin asked. Because trust is a weakness, she said, a bitter edge creeping into her voice. At least, that's what I told myself. I've been betrayed too many times. By lovers, by business partners, by people I thought were my friends. Eventually, I stopped trying. I built walls around my heart so high that no one could ever get in. And I convinced myself that was strength. But it's not, is it? Griffin said quietly. It's just another kind of loneliness. A lonelier kind. Coraline stared at him, something shifting in her expression. You see straight through me, don't you? You see the things I try so hard to hide. I've been there, Griffin said. After my wife left, I did the same thing. I shut down. I convinced myself I didn't need anyone. But then I looked at my daughters, and I realized, I couldn't do that to them. They needed me to be present. They needed me to be vulnerable. And so I tried. I'm still trying. It's not easy. It never is, Coraline said softly. But maybe it's worth it. The next morning, Griffin woke up in his cramped new apartment, the morning sun streaming through thin curtains that did little to hide the peeling paint on the walls. His daughters were already bouncing on his bed, demanding pancakes and cartoons and all the chaotic joy that came with small children. Daddy, Daddy, wake up. Hazel squealed, poking his cheek. We're hungry. 5 more minutes, Griffin groaned, pulling the pillow over his head. No. Poppy shouted, yanking the pillow away. You promised we'd have pancakes. Fine, fine, Griffin laughed, giving in to their relentless assault. I'm getting up. I'm getting up. He was in the middle of making breakfast, a messy affair involving spilled flour and a very confused attempts at pancake art, when his phone buzzed on the counter. A text from an unknown number. Good morning, Griffin. This is Coraline Ashford. I have a proposition for you. Please come to the Havenport Tower at 9 a.m. I'll send a car. And don't worry, I'll make it worth your while. He stared at the message, his heart pounding. What could she possibly want? He had saved her life, yes, but he didn't expect anything in return. That wasn't the kind of person he was. He was a man who gave without expecting, who helped because it was the right thing to do, not because he wanted a reward. But there was something in the tone of her message. Something urgent, something important, that made him think this wasn't just a thank you dinner. Girls, he said carefully, I need to go out for a little while. Mrs. Patterson next door is going to watch you, okay? Are you going to see the hurt princess? Hazel asked, her eyes lighting up. Maybe, Griffin said. But I'll be back before you know it. I promise. He dressed in his best suit, a modest, slightly worn thing that had seen better days. And left the girls with their elderly neighbor, a kind woman who adored them and always had cookies ready. Then he took the sleek black car that arrived promptly at his door. The Havenport Tower was a monument to corporate ambition, a glass and steel behemoth that pierced the clouds like a spear. Griffin had seen it from a distance, but up close, it was overwhelming, a testament to the power and wealth of the woman who had built it. He was ushered into a private elevator that whisked him to the top floor, where a stunning woman with a flawless smile and an immaculate suit greeted him. Mr. Shaw, Ms. Ashford is expecting you. Right this way. He was led into an office that was more of a penthouse, floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the city, minimalist furniture that probably cost more than his annual salary, and an air of quiet, unassailable power. The kind of power that came from decades of hard work and ruthless determination. Coraline was behind a massive mahogany desk, her leg propped up on a stool, her bandaged head giving her a strangely vulnerable appearance. Despite her injuries, she radiated the same commanding presence she had shown in the hospital. She was dressed in a tailored blazer and silk blouse, her dark hair styled perfectly, her makeup flawless. She was a woman who refused to be diminished by anything. Even a near-fatal car accident. Griffin, she said, gesturing for him to sit. Thank you for coming. Please, have a seat. He sat down across from her, feeling small and out of place. What's this about? He asked, his voice cautious. You said you had a proposition. Coraline leaned forward, her eyes locking onto his with that same intense focus. I've been the CEO of Ashford Industries for a decade. It's a massive conglomerate, real estate, technology, finance, pharmaceuticals. I built it from nothing, and I've run it with an iron fist. But last night, lying in that hospital bed, staring at the ceiling and wondering if I was going to survive, I had an epiphany. Griffin stayed silent, waiting. I realized that I've been surrounded by sycophants and yes-men for years, she continued. People who tell me what I want to hear, not what I need to hear. People who are more concerned with protecting their own jobs than with doing what's right. People who would smile to my face and stab me in the back the moment I turned around. But you're different. You saved my life without expecting anything in return. You didn't even know who I was. And yet, you were kind. You were brave. You were exactly the kind of person I need in my organization. I don't understand, Griffin said, frowning. I'm an architect. I don't know anything about running a corporation. I've never even managed a team of more than 5 people. I don't need you to run it, Coraline said, a small smile curling her lips. I need you to be my eyes and ears. My conscience. My right hand. You see things from the ground level, from a human perspective. That's what Ashford Industries has been missing. That's what I've been missing. She slid a thick folder across the desk. Inside was a contract, dense with legalese and financial jargon, but the headline caught his eye, Chief Executive Officer. I want you to be my new CEO, Coraline said. I'll remain as chairwoman, but I want you to run the company day to day. You'll have my full support, my resources, and a salary that will make your head spin. In return, you'll bring heart to this corporation. You'll show me what I've been blind to. You'll teach me what it means to be a leader, not just a boss. Griffin stared at her, his mouth hanging open. You can't be serious. I'm a single dad with no corporate experience. I'm nobody. I'm a nobody. You're not nobody, Coraline said, her voice firm and unwavering. You're the man who saved my life. And I have a gut feeling about you, Griffin. I've built an empire on my gut feelings, and they've never steered me wrong. So I'm asking you, will you do this? Will you help me rebuild this company from the inside out? Will you help me become the person I'm supposed to be? Griffin looked at her, at the vulnerability beneath the steel, and he felt something shift inside him. He had spent so long feeling small, feeling inadequate, feeling like he didn't matter. But here was this powerful, successful woman, telling him that he had value. That he could make a difference. That he could be more than he ever thought possible. Okay, he said, his voice barely a whisper. Okay, I'll do it. I'll try. Coraline's face broke into a brilliant smile, and for the first time, Griffin saw the real woman beneath the corporate armor. Thank you, Griffin. You won't regret this. I promise you. The first few weeks were chaos. The board was hostile, the executives were resentful, and the media was merciless. Architect turned CEO, the headlines screamed. Is Ashford Industries losing its mind? Griffin was mocked, belittled, and dismissed at every turn. He was called a fraud, a charity case, a mistake. He was told he didn't belong, that he was out of his depth, that he should go back to drawing houses and leave the real work to the professionals. But Griffin didn't give up. He did the one thing the corporate sharks hadn't expected, he listened. He toured the factories, visited the warehouses, and sat down with the lowest-level employees to ask them what they needed. He learned their names, their stories, their struggles. He learned about the single mother working 2 jobs to support her children, the recent immigrant who had fled a war-torn country, the elderly janitor who had been with the company for 40 years and was terrified of being laid off. He treated everyone with respect, and slowly, incrementally, he began to earn their trust. He implemented flexible work hours for parents. He created a mentorship program for young women in STEM. He donated a percentage of profits to local schools and community centers. He started a childcare subsidy for employees who couldn't afford daycare. He established a mental health program, offering free counseling to anyone who needed it. The employees, once cynical and disengaged, started to believe in the company again. Profits began to rise. Morale soared. The media, always hungry for a good story, started to change their tune. The architecture of success, one headline read. How one man's heart transformed a corporation. Coraline watched from her penthouse office, her broken leg slowly healing, her admiration for him growing with each passing day. She saw the way he transformed the company, not through aggressive takeovers or ruthless cost-cutting, but through genuine compassion and a stubborn refusal to treat people like numbers. He was everything she had never been, everything she had never allowed herself to be. You were right, she admitted one evening, as they watched the sunset from her office. The city sprawled beneath them, glittering and alive, 1,000 lights twinkling in the gathering darkness. I never would have thought of any of this. The childcare, the mental health program, the mentorship. I was too focused on the bottom line. I forgot that people are more than just resources. That's because you were too busy looking at the numbers, Griffin said, smiling. You forgot to look at the people behind them. You forgot that every number represents a life, a family, a dream. You forgot that success isn't just about profit. It's about purpose. I'm not used to people, she said quietly. I've spent my whole life building walls. keeping everyone at arm's length. Protecting myself from being hurt. But you smashed right through them, didn't you? You made me feel things I haven't felt in years. I didn't mean to, he said, his voice soft. I don't know how to be any other way. I wear my heart on my sleeve. It's gotten me hurt before, but it's also given me the most beautiful things in my life, my daughters, my purpose, my hope. I wouldn't trade that for anything. You're a remarkable man, Griffin Shaw, Coraline said, her eyes glistening. And I'm so grateful to have met you. To have you in my life. But not everyone was happy with the changes. Inside the company, a faction of old guard executives, led by the ruthless vice president, Sterling Voss, was plotting. Sterling was a shark in an expensive suit, a man who had spent years climbing the corporate ladder on the backs of others. He had expected to be named CEO when Coraline stepped down. Instead, she had chosen a nobody, a single dad who spent his lunch breaks building birdhouses with his daughters. Sterling was furious. And he was dangerous. He began spreading rumors, whispering to the board that Griffin was incompetent, that he was ruining the company, that he was Coraline's charity case. He leaked false financial reports to the press, making it look like Griffin's policies were tanking the stock. He even tried to bribe a factory worker to accuse Griffin of sexual harassment. The allegations were false, but they did their damage. The board called an emergency meeting. Griffin was summoned, his reputation in tatters, his heart heavy with the weight of the accusations. He felt like he was drowning, like everything he had worked for was slipping away. But Coraline arrived at the meeting in a fury. Her green eyes blazed with righteous anger as she faced the board, her crutches tapping against the marble floor with every step. "This is a coup," she said, her voice cold and sharp. "You're trying to destroy a good man because he threatened your cushy little positions. Well, let me tell you something, I built this company. I can tear it down just as easily. And if you think for 1 second that I'm going to let you railroad Griffin, you're sadly mistaken." Sterling smirked, his confidence unshaken. "Coraline, be reasonable. The man is a liability. He has no experience, no qualifications, no. He has heart," Coraline interrupted. "Something you wouldn't recognize if it hit you in the face. He has integrity. He has courage. He has compassion. And he has my unwavering support. So you can take your little smear campaign and shove it, Sterling. Because if Griffin goes, I go. And I'll take my shares with me. Good luck running a company with a 20% stock drop and a PR nightmare on your hands." The room went silent. The board members exchanged nervous glances. They knew Coraline was not bluffing. She had walked away from billion-dollar deals before, and she would do it again. "Are you sure about this?" one of them asked, his voice wavering. "Are you willing to risk everything for one man?" "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," Coraline said. "Griffin is the best thing that's happened to this company. And he's the best thing that's happened to me. So I suggest you get on board, or get out of the way." Sterling stormed out, his face purple with rage. The board voted to keep Griffin. The rumors were discredited, the false reports retracted. And Griffin, who had been on the verge of resigning, found himself standing in the middle of the boardroom, stunned and overwhelmed. "How did you do that?" he asked Coraline, his voice shaking. "How did you fix everything so quickly?" "I told you," she said, her eyes softening. "I have a gut feeling about you. And I never let anyone mess with the people I care about. You're not just my CEO, Griffin. You're my friend. And I will always fight for you." That night, Griffin took Coraline to his tiny apartment for dinner. His daughters, Poppy and Hazel, were overjoyed to see her. They had been asking about the hurt princess for weeks, and now here she was, sitting on their worn-out couch, laughing at their jokes, eating their father's slightly burnt pasta. Miss Coraline, Hazel said, her eyes wide, do you live in that big tower all by yourself? I do, Coraline said, her smile faltering just a little. It can get quiet. Lonely, Poppy said, nodding sagely. I know lonely. After Mommy left, Daddy was lonely too. But then we got each other, and it got better. You need to get yourself some people, Miss Coraline. People who love you. People who will stay. Coraline blinked, something flickering in her eyes. You're a very wise little girl, Poppy. I know, Poppy said, grinning. I get it from my daddy. Later, after the girls were asleep, Griffin and Coraline sat on the tiny balcony, looking up at the stars. The city sprawled beneath them, glittering and alive, but they were in their own little world. I didn't realize how lonely I was, Coraline admitted softly. I've been running from it my whole life. The success, the money, the power. I thought they would fill the void. But they didn't. They just made it bigger. They just made me more isolated. I was surrounded by people, but I never felt more alone. What changed? Griffin asked. You, she said, turning to look at him. You and your girls. You showed me what I was missing. You showed me that real success isn't about the bottom line. It's about the people you love, the lives you touch, the legacy you leave behind. It's about being vulnerable enough to let people in, even when it's scary. Griffin reached over and took her hand. You're not alone anymore, Coraline. You have us now. If you want us. I want you, she said, her voice barely a whisper. I've wanted you since the moment I woke up in that hospital and saw your face. I just didn't know how to say it. I've spent so long pretending I didn't need anyone that I forgot how to ask for what I want. Say it now, Griffin said, his heart pounding. Say it loud and clear. I love you, Coraline said. I love you, Griffin Shaw. And I love your daughters. I want to be part of your family. I want to be there for all of you, always. I want to wake up next to you every morning and come home to you every night. I want to watch your girls grow up and be there for every milestone. I want to build a life with you. Griffin leaned in and kissed her, soft and sweet, and she melted into his arms. It was everything he had ever wanted and never dared to hope for. It was love, pure and simple, and it was beautiful. A year later, they were married in a beautiful ceremony at the Havenport Botanical Gardens. The gardens were in full bloom, a riot of color and fragrance that filled the air with the scent of roses and jasmine. The girls were flower girls, their laughter echoing through the greenhouse as they scattered petals with wild abandon. The employees of Ashford Industries threw a massive party, and even the board members, the ones who had tried to oust Griffin, showed up, their tails between their legs. Sterling Voss had been fired, his schemes exposed for all to see. He had tried to start a competing company, but it had failed spectacularly. Last anyone heard, he was working as a used car salesman in a small town in Nebraska, a fitting end for a man who had tried to destroy something beautiful. Coraline stepped down as chairwoman, handing the reins entirely to Griffin. Under his leadership, Ashford Industries became a model of ethical capitalism, a company that prioritized people over profits, compassion over greed. It was called the Shaw Revolution in business magazines, and Griffin became a celebrated figure, not for his cutthroat tactics, but for his kindness. But for Griffin, the greatest success was the family he had built. He and Coraline had 2 more children, twins, a boy and a girl, whom they named Arthur and Amelia. The house was full of noise and chaos and love, and Coraline, who had once been the loneliest woman in the world, was now surrounded by people who adored her. One evening, as the sun set over the city in shades of gold and crimson, Griffin and Coraline sat on their porch, watching their children play in the yard. Poppy was pushing Hazel on the swing, while Arthur and Amelia toddled after each other, giggling uncontrollably. The sound of their laughter was the most beautiful music in the world. "I never thought I could be this happy," Coraline said, leaning her head on Griffin's shoulder. "I spent so many years building walls. And you just walked right through them. You didn't even knock. You just showed up and saved my life, and then you showed me how to live." "I had some help," Griffin said, smiling. "The girls gave me a pretty good head start. They saw the good in you before I did. They knew you were a princess who just needed someone to believe in her." "Remind me to thank them," Coraline said. "They saved me, you know. All of you. You saved me from myself. You showed me that I was worthy of love, even when I couldn't see it myself." "No," Griffin said, kissing her forehead. "You saved yourself. We just showed you the way. You had the strength in you all along. You just needed to let yourself be vulnerable enough to find it." Coraline looked up at him, her green eyes shining with unshed tears. "I love you, Griffin Shaw. I love you more than I ever thought possible." "I love you too, Coraline," he said. "Always. Forever. For the rest of our lives." And in that moment, surrounded by laughter and love and the golden light of the setting sun, Coraline knew, she had finally found what she had been searching for all her life. Not power. Not money. Not control. Just love. Simple, messy, beautiful love. The family she never thought she deserved. The happiness she never believed she could have. It was all right here, in the arms of a man who had saved her life, and in the hearts of children who had saved her soul. She was Coraline Shaw now, and she was finally, truly, completely home. Her journey had been long and painful, filled with loneliness and fear and doubt, but it had led her here, to this moment, to this family, to this love. And she knew, with absolute certainty, that this was exactly where she was meant to be. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold, and the world was filled with the promise of a new dawn. Coraline closed her eyes, breathed in the scent of the garden, and let herself be held. She was safe. She was loved. She was whole. And she was never, ever going to let go.